Dr. Montessori was living in India during the war. There were many different Indian subcultural groups, many different dialects being spoken, families living there with children of all ages. For Dr. Montessori, this was a time of reflection. She began to realize that there was some work we could do with families and with children younger than children coming into the casa.
Good morning. How are you today? How are you today? I feel so happy. Let's change it.
This work has been going on for a long time. What we do now in training is not just 30 years old, it's 70 years old.
She wanted to support women, that you don't have to give up your work or give your mind because you have a child, that if you have a well-educated person to help you, you can also continue your work. And that's why she did all these courses, to help women understand the mind of the child and keep on studying more to be able to support this mind, to be able to support and have healthy children.
Parents were so appreciative that they had a place where they could have their children be during the day, and they knew that the place was clean, it was quiet, it was peaceful, and there were Montessori teachers there who really cared for their children, but it was more than daycare. It was child development. To me, that was the beginning of social justice. And I think that was her vision, was that that kind of an opportunity for children was sacred, that the child is sacred, and that we need to find a way to have all children to have that kind of an opportunity. So for me, social justice means that every child has a way of being part of the stages of human growth and development.
A nido is an Italian or Spanish term which means nest, and it's an environment that's created for infants up to walking well, but it is primarily an environment for working parents. It is not an environment that infants need. It's an environment for the convenience of working parents. But it has to function completely for the needs of the infant.
The nido class is really for you and the parents. The parents are involved in the nido. You have to make that a parent environment in which they feel comfortable, they trust the environment, and they can visit the environment anytime they want. It has to be a very peaceful flow in the nido.
It is at that moment that these children begin to experience the peace and the quiet and all of the opportunities for learning. The children have a beautiful environment and they have a place to sleep. The children are not in a crib. The children are allowed to be free. They're allowed to move. They wake up, they move. They are there in that beautiful environment, and they begin to explore that environment. The Montessori teacher is there to prepare the little children with language and any other kinds of materials that are available for the child. The infants are sitting at a little table, and they're beginning to eat with their pincher fingers.
Delicious.
They're being prepared to be citizens in their community until they're walking well, and then they are transferred to the toddler room. To me, what more could one do than to provide an infant and a toddler with such a lovely experience as helping them to develop internally at such a young age in a very peaceful environment.
Once the baby is born and after it's a couple months old, a practitioner can do something that sometimes are called parent-infant classes or parent-child classes, but it doesn't have to be a parent. It can be a nanny, it can be a grandparent, but an adult and a baby. And these classes meet usually once a week.
Okay. So what happens is that it's more of a reflex, and then they start learning how to move better and better, and then the reflex falls away.
Okay.
Parents are trained to be able to observe, to move back a bit and observe their child a little bit objectively, to be able to see what kinds of activities appeal to their child and how to present them to the child in a way that the child can use. So the practitioner does a lot of modeling of how to interact with babies and how to also pull back and not interfere when a baby is concentrating on something, which most of us do, even if it's to say, oh, isn't that a lovely toy?
One of the very important aspects of working with children is working not only with the child, but also with the parents. It's forming a relationship with the parent, making them comfortable, letting them know we understand what they're going through, as well as trying to throw things in there every now and then, small little bits of information that they then want to come back and ask questions about later on, and you can give them more specifics. When you have a group of parents and you're having a discussion and you're getting to know each other, there are different personalities that come out with the parents, and everyone wants to know that they're right. All parents want to know that they're doing the right thing. So in whatever way that you can, you need to affirm to them that at least they're doing something correctly. And also to let them know that everyone's going to do it differently. That all parents aren't going to have the same response, the same communication with their child, the same reaction, the same trips that they take with their children, the same bedtime routine, the same books that they're going to read. They're not going to all have the same lives. It's good for them to hear that. It's good for them to hear other people's lives and to not be judgmental. The teacher's role in terms of interacting with the parents has to be professional, but you still want to form a relationship. So it's a balance. You can't become too familiar. There's a certain time where we communicate, and then there is a certain time where it's about the children. And this environment is for the children. It's not for the parent interactions. It's not for communicating with parents. So you have to set up boundaries and limits with the parents, just like you do with the children. And they understand that those boundaries are a healthy aspect of the relationship that benefits not only you and the parent, but also the child.
Tomato?
From her observations of young children, Montessori came up with this term that's very particular to Montessori. This term is the absorbent mind. She realized that the mind of children under 6 functions quite differently than the mind of a child over 6. Under 6, the child's mind is capable of taking in the minutest details of life. They do it without any effort. When they're really young, they do it without even being aware they're doing it, certainly under 2.5 or 3. She called that the unconscious absorbent mind. They absorb everything without any prejudice, without any preconceived ideas. They take on life as it is lived in their group.
Crying. It's crying. Oh, it's crying. Crying. Oh, it's crying. What?
Looks like he was having some breakfast.
It's raining.
They take on every tiny aspect of life. But we don't think about other kinds of movement patterns to that tiny degree that children will absorb them. So this power that Montessori so early recognized is, I think, an untapped potential. I think we truly never give it as much credence as we should and recognize everything it's taking in. I think one of the negative aspects, maybe, of the absorbent mind is it also takes in negative aspects of life. And it takes those aspects of life in as the normal way of life. Whatever is taken in those first 6 years is to the child the normal way of life. And that sets the foundation that everything else is built on. All the intellectual work that comes, all the cognitive work that comes, all the social work that comes is scaffolded onto the information taken in by the absorbent mind. So if a child grows up in an abusive environment, they see that way of relating to humans as normal. So as an older person, that child's really going to have to work to overcome. They will never erase those patterns, but they can compensate for them. They can overcome that as their first response of how to relate to humans. In the same way, if a child is in a very rich environment, they absorb that as the normal way.
Ava, you ready to dance with Reese? Hands will come and dance with me. Both my hands I give to thee. Right foot first, left foot bend. Round and back again.
In order for every child's inborn human potential to be fully and deeply actualized, we want to give them the richest environment possible in all aspects of life. We want to expose them to as much as possible so that they take that in as normal. Children who experience different languages, different physical abilities, different needs, special needs in particular, those are just absorbed as normal, natural characteristics of those people. There's no prejudice. There's no bias formed. So I think the wider, the broader a child's experience is under 6, the more accepting of life in all of its manifestations, more accepting that becomes as the norm of humanity.
What would be a good thing to talk about? Have any ideas?
Macaroni.
Macaroni, food. Macaroni is a type of pasta. Yeah, pasta that has cheese. Melted cheese in it. So we can talk about the things we're having for lunch today. It looks like we're having pears. Someone sliced pears for us today.
I did.
Did you slice some pears? I know I saw Constantine.
pears.
Did you slice some pears? Thank you. I saw someone slicing strawberries.
I sliced the cheese.
And cheese. And Cabot cut the cheese for us. Thank you, Cabot.
Montessori always said, trust the organizing power of the human intellect. If a child is surrounded by language, they will develop language, spoken language. If the child is surrounded by poor, minimal language, that's the language they're going to develop, but they will develop language. If they're in a very rich language environment where they're spoken to a lot and read to a lot and sung to a lot, that's what they'll develop. But they will all develop spoken language. It's very easy to think a child is only capable of learning one language. But there are many cultures in the world where children are surrounded on a daily, consistent basis by people who speak different languages. And this also struck Montessori when she first started having experiences with children under 3 when she was in India.
When children are very, very young, they can absorb as many languages as we give children an opportunity to have. I think every child ought to have an opportunity to have a good, strong dual language opportunity at the very youngest ages. It's very challenging to do dual language. It's challenging to do bilingual education. But if you really want to do it well, you start with the little infants and toddlers. To me, that's the best time to begin a program.
Daddy.
¿Extrañas?
Daddy.
Échale la ropa sucia. Ven aquí. Ropa sucia. Y vamos al baño.
Now, there are lots of communities today where the schools are set up to really support the development of more than one language. In these communities, the most effective way for this to happen is to have an educated native speaker for each of the languages. And that person only speaks that language to the children. Therefore, you have a better possibility of a rich language environment.
Zanahoria, Kyla. Sí, por favor.
Yes.
Zanahoria, Helena. Sí, por favor.
Would you like some peas?
Zanahoria, Mason.
Just as a child absorbs from their experiences with this person, this is what my mom or my teacher looks like. This is what color hair she has. This is, she wears glasses or doesn't wear glasses. She speaks this language or she doesn't. She speaks this language or this language. And so children, by the time they're verbal, have then absorbed the foundations for every language they're surrounded by. I think the hardest thing for adults is that initial period when the children don't understand the language, especially if they're coming from a monolingual family and they go into an environment where there is a second language spoken by another adult. There is a period of challenge. I'm not saying it's easy. It is a period of challenge, both for the adult and for the child. But it doesn't last forever. It lasts only a period of time, and then children begin to get it. They get that other language, and they gradually start responding, just as they did with their primary language, and then they develop certain language skills. So I think the earlier children are exposed and given the opportunity to learn a second or a third language, the better off they're going to be. When we think about children becoming multilingual or bilingual or trilingual, we have to be very careful that we don't confuse that with culture. Language is one aspect of culture. And by allowing children to learn more than one language, for example, we're just expanding their appreciation of human cultures. They can take on all the cultural values of more than one culture. You want children to value and to maintain all of their family's culture, all of their country's culture, but at the same time become open and aware and appreciative of other human cultures. I think that's one of the beauties of Montessori, because we look at cultures as ways that people have satisfied basic needs. We learn to communicate. We develop different languages. We have to eat food. We develop different food preferences. We develop different appreciation of clothing, different kinds of clothing, the different ways we move our bodies about. All those basic human needs have been satisfied in numerous ways across this planet. To help children see the beauty in all of that, I think is a gift that Montessori really can give to the world and to children and to families, to really feel valued for who they are, the culture they're coming from, but to broaden it and to appreciate the rest of the cultures of the world.